The problem that I think this allows us to put a fine point on is the following. In society, we've confused a lot of people to think that the opposite of liberal is conservative or Republican. And I think that's the cycle that drives the mind virus inside the mainstream media. The problem is the opposite of liberal is illiberal, okay? And what illiberal means is to be narrow-minded and unenlightened. It means to be puritanical. It means to be fundamentalist. And this is really what it allows us to see now. We have now had 6 years of data, case after case after case, where if you are woke, if you are a social justice warrior, if you have the right credentials that justify your upbringing, if you have institutional bona fides that come from your parents, you get to create the narrative and you get a hall pass. And everybody else basically is at the subject and the mercy of the mainstream media. And so if you don't kiss the ring and bow down to them, they will try to destroy you or run you out of town. But if you are one of them, they will give you a hall pass. And when it's time for them to change their mind in order to tell the truth, they won't do it. And so these types of grifts will continue, as Friedberg said, because there is no check and balance without a healthy, independent media. There is no way for all of us to actually know what's really going on. Guys, some person in the media could have asked the question and dug in deeper around the connections between Alameda and FTX for the last 24 months.
So could have diligence at a venture firm.
At no point could any person have asked these questions and found ex-employees and said, are there any unseemly connections here between FTX and Alameda? There was no disgruntled employee. I mean, every company has disgruntled employee whistleblowers. But here, where there was billions of dollars being made by tens of people, not a single person who felt on the outs said anything.
Well, he was also giving millions of dollars to press outlets.
Hold on. It's because the questions weren't asked, and then this kid paid hush money to the mainstream media.
Let me ask you a question of you guys. Do you think that it's the media's responsibility in this context, or do you think that there should have been a regulatory authority that had oversight of this business like there is for every bank and every trading operation in the United States? And every one of those businesses has a compliance officer and has regulators up the wazoo, making sure that customers are kept safe and protected. Or do we think that should offshore vehicles be allowed like this that allow people to operate?
It's a reasonable question, but there was a chicken and egg question. We were all standing around holding our hands while the CFTC and the SEC were fighting. That's not something that consumers can be expected to adjudicate. So yes, we should have legislation that clearly defines all of this, but there were enough parameters that created regulatory frameworks where a bunch of good actors did operate in them and are continuing to do so, like Coinbase. So I don't think this is a regulatory issue. I think that if you believe there are people who are supposed to forensically examine things and get to the bottom of things and ask hard questions, those people did none of that here. And what's even more worrisome is what they're showing is now with a massive amount of data that shows that you could ask hard questions, they don't care to because it makes them look bad.
I disagree with this, Chamath. I think regulators failed here because they have been reactive to crypto. They have not been proactive, and they have not been clear with the crypto community that what they were doing was illegal, and they should have put the regulations in quicker, and they're playing catch up. But all three groups failed. The media failed, the regulators failed, and VCs failed. Capital allocators failed, apparently, to do diligence here and install proper governance. You cannot put a company like this, in business with
Jason,
billions of dollars and have no board of directors.
No, I agree with you.
Or he lied to them, which
I agree
is possible.
with you. My point is that while regulators are basically fighting a territorial turf war, okay, the media could have still done their job. They chose not to.
Guys, it was worse than that because it's not just a case where the SEC failed to exercise any oversight of him or dig into any of these questions. He was in the room with them crafting the next set of regulations. He was working on the regulations that you're talking about that are supposedly needed.
While breaking them.
They let the fox in the hen house.
Yeah.
He was going to craft a new type of regulatory license for these types of exchanges with the result that he was going to get one and some of his competitors weren't. This was one of the things that triggered CZ to basically, do what he did, which is basically that SBF was trying to get Binance and competitors like that banned, while SBF would be one of the sole people to get the license.
By the way,
And he got
Jason,
jumped.
here's
He
an
got
example.
He was working with the regulators.
Yeah, Jason, you just said something derogatory towards CZ. He rug pulled them. Did he do that, or did he actually expose the fraud?
That's what I mean by rug pulling. Yeah.
Well,
He was partners with him.
That's not what rug pull means, Jason.
Okay, well, he was partners with him, and then he realized he was weak and that he was doing some stuff that was shady, and he decided he would eliminate a partner who was creating regulation, as Sachs said. Whatever you want to say, he knifed him.
All he did was indicate a desire to liquidate his position in a token that was supposedly perfectly liquid. And that's basically, that caused everything to unravel.
Yeah, but these were partners, right? I mean, these were deep business partners.
But,
and they were partners. They were collaborating on these tokens together. So they weren't competitors.
No, they were not,
so.
Jason. Like part of the big loan that initiated all of this stuff like a year and a half ago was to buy FTX off the cap table. So, this all I'm saying is like you used words in your framing of a guy, who's built a business is like he is this nefarious bad actor.
Binance was FTX's first investor.
Hold on a second. But David's right. All the guy did, as far as we can tell right now, is tweet, "I'm selling this token because I don't believe in the capital structure of this entity." And he got those tokens by being bought out of the cap table.
I know. He was partners with them. So if you don't like rug pulled, how about backstab?
No,
These were business partners.
No, they're not partners.
No, you still don't understand, Jason.
Of course I understand. He was the first investor. So to do this to a company you were investing
out. No,
exactly.
He then got bought out.
And
if part
of the
business
consideration,
partners,
part of the consideration were these tokens, these FTT
I understand
tokens.
Yes.
Jason, when Uber went public,
yes,
and you got distributed stock, did you distribute and sell Uber at any point?
Previous to that, I sold some to Masa.
No. I'm asking you a question. When Uber went public and you got distributed from Uber,
I didn't. No.
Your stock. So you've never sold a single share of Uber
Not since it's public. No, I sold it before in private markets.
Okay,
yeah, but I'm sorry, but that doesn't make Jason a partner of Uber. You're just a stockholder.
Yeah.
This is slightly different, I think. But okay, fine. You guys, if you guys want to consider, he was the first investor in the company.
That might have been a historical situation, but their status at the time that CZ tweeted was that they were competitors.
Okay, fine. I mean, they became competitors. I agree.
And by the way, to Tomas' point about this rug pulling language, I think we're getting kind of down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, we're getting down the weeds here. But
what CZ did perform a service in this sense. Okay, SBF claims that $4 billion more was about to come in. I personally don't believe that. Sounds like bullshit to me. But if it is true, that would have been a bad thing. The more money that came in to that operation, SBF proved that he was a very poor custodian of customer funds.
For sure.
They're being siphoned off
I'm not
for his own
defending
use.
SBF, but
the longer this went on,
I'm just highlighting the language that you use is sort of like, again, part of that establishment elite narrative. And I'm just questioning, you should maybe steelman, take a second to just steelman a more dispassionate view, which is here's a counterparty, who, when he left the cap table, was given half cash, half tokens.
Okay.
And he decided to sell his tokens.
Yeah, and tweet it publicly and cause a run on the bank. So
it was not a run on the bank. There was no bank. Where's the bank? This run on the bank language, is something, this was in the semaphore coverage,
He did it publicly. That's my point. So I'll steelman it for you.
No.
Hey, these tokens are worthless. I need to liquidate them as fast as possible. But why would you do that publicly? Why wouldn't you do it privately?
Because you're about to move the market.
He wanted to move the market to zero.
No, he's about to move the market. He's letting people know why.
But he wanted to kill his competitor, as Chamath was just saying. CZ wanted to kill his competitor who was trying to kill him.
I didn't say he was trying to do that.
We got to back up here because I think we've done a lot of like 30,000 foot like lessons and like takeaways from this whole thing, but we haven't really established what it is that SBF did wrong. So I think we need to sort of take a second to unmuddy the waters. Okay. And part of that, I think we should start with this idea of a run on the bank because the press who've been writing puff pieces about SBF, I'd say mainly Semaphore, which he was a big donor to. They've been trying to frame it as a run on the bank. And then that implies that it's not really his fault. It could happen to anybody. Lots of banks have had this problem. Okay. First of all, they're not a bank. Banks actually have the legal right under certain conditions to take customer deposits and loan them out. Okay.
Yes.
They did not. Their terms of use did not allow that, as Stephanopoulos pointed out. SBF's answer to that was, well, we had this like margin account program. There were other provisions and other terms of use. But most of the customers who lost money, the vast majority, did not opt into that program. They never agreed to that. So that's point number one. Point number two is I think we need to look at this language of margin account. Okay. SBF's explanation of how customer money was siphoned off for his own personal use, i.e. to Alameda, is that Alameda had a margin account. So I think we could perform a service here by explaining why it wasn't a margin account. And, Chamath, and you guys understand this really well. The way that a margin account works is the following, okay? Because I think some of us have them set up with investment banks. You go to an investment bank, say Morgan Stanley, and you post collateral. You actually over collateralize. So for example, you might take $100 million of stock, post it at the investment bank, and then they will let you loan a certain percentage, nowhere near 100%, maybe 50% loan to value.
So if you have a very, very liquid security, you may get 50% coverage,
Right.
which means if you posted $100 million, you could get a $50 million loan.
Okay,
But
so you have $100 million in Amazon stock. You're some Amazon VP. You can get $50 million loaned.
and if it's a private asset, it's anywhere as high as 30%, 35%, but typically it's about 25%. My expectation is in a liquid token like this would have basically gotten 5 or 10% coverage ratio at the best of it. And then what happens is you have these maintenance values. So if all of a sudden the value of these entities multiplied by that percentage that you're allowed to loan falls below, you have to post money. That's how a margin account
Right.
works. It's just, there is no free lunch in that.
Yes, exactly.
Let me just say quite simply, very simply, what it appears this guy did. He took customer deposits in US dollars. He then converted those dollars into some other asset. And he had a mark on that asset. Let's call it $1 a token. And then those dollars were moved to somewhere else.
No, this is
Because
simpler than
someone
that.
transferred in some other token.
Listen,
but
we
that's
need to Freeman, we need to finish the explainer around the margin account, okay? Because what SBF did is this. He took customer deposits, gave them to himself,
just be clear.
Alameda.
He took customer deposits in US dollars. They were wired in.
Correct.
He took those dollars out and he put a fake token in. And he called
right.
that.
That's right.
Therefore he said the balance sheet is good. But the value of that token, it turns out, isn't $1, it's 10 cents.
That's right. It was his sort of his made up token that
FTT is the name of that token.
that he tightly controlled the trading of and artificially propped up the price.
And by the way,
so
it wasn't
he had
just
phony
FTT.
collateral, but
yeah.
But here's the thing. It wasn't just the fact that his collateral was no good. It was also the fact that, and this is from the bankruptcy filing by the Enron trustee guy. He specifically said that Alameda, unlike every other margin account on the platform, had the auto liquidation provisions turned off. So wait, we have to finish the thought around how margin works. So like Tomas said, you overpost collateral. And if the value of that collateral goes down, or the position, your trading account, the value of that goes down, you either have to post more collateral or they will actually liquidate your collateral to pay off the loan. So Morgan Stanley will never lose money on a margin account. Never. Right. Like the whole point is because they don't make money on it. They loan you the money at a few percent. It's like very cheap loan.
LIBOR plus or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That is not a risk account to them. And
so again, in the example, let's use an example. People understand.
Yes.
In the case of the VP at Amazon, who's got $100 million in Amazon, they have a $50 million loan. If Amazon loses half its value, then that triggers the automatic selling of Amazon shares to get it back down to 50% coverage. So now you got to sell 25 million of Amazon shares if the full 50 million was pulled down to get back down to 50% leverage.
Yes, and they don't wait until Amazon stock is at the exact level where now the collateral equals 100% of the loan. They will keep that 50% loan to value.
Yes.
And they will liquidate you, and by the way, you can lose your entire amount, right? So, this is why trading on margin is so risky, is that
you can get wiped out completely.
You can get wiped out very, very quickly with a small move down.
Because they are the custodians of that Amazon stock. They are holding it for you now, and they have the right to sell it to cover your margin.
Right.
You're saying that governor, that basic tenant, that basic safety control was turned off by Alameda. And it's even more sinister. Alameda controlled like 90 or 95% of these FTT tokens and was owned by Sam Bankman-Fried. So he owned that company. Then he claims he had no operating position in it.
What should have happened is with that collateral is that as the value of their position was going down and or as the value of the collateral was going down, it should have been liquidated to pay off the margin loan. And that did not happen. And the reason it didn't happen is that Alameda got a special exception on the platform to turn off auto liquidation. Therefore, it was never a margin account. Even if it was a margin account, okay, and FTX somehow misadministered the margin account, it should never have taken other customers' deposits and used them to pay back that money. What should have happened is if FTX was going to lose money on a margin account, that would hit the FTX corporate treasury, okay? And when the FTX corporate treasury ran out, the company files for bankruptcy then, and then all the other customers, hold on, their account is still there. Their money is there in segregated accounts, and in bankruptcy, they get their money back. The idea that a margin account could ever cause another customer to lose money, that like whatever that is, that's not a margin account.
There's a great article. There's a great article. This one was a journalist that did his job properly. His name is David Z. Morris. He wrote an article in CoinDesk that summed up, for anybody that's interested, all of the actual fraud and all of the crimes that were committed in excruciating detail. And what's so sad about all these interviews and this press tour is if anybody would just read this article, you can construct the right questions to ask this guy just based on this one article. But the point I wanted to make is that one of the most interesting insights was these guys had lost an enormous amount of money already in calendar year 21. And so this is what's so crazy, Jason, about, you using language like rug pulling and nobody actually trying to be clear. Like you guys are giving this guy a hall pass.
I'm not giving him a hall pass.
Any industrious reporter could have found an employee who said, wait a minute, we just blew a $3 billion hole in our balance sheet in calendar year 20, and now we're sitting here at the end of 22.
Chamath, there's great. Hold on a second. Hold on. I need to respond. I am not giving him a pass. And for you to blame journalists who are reflecting the crime and not putting any light on VCs and the capital allocators who made this investment and who did no diligence and not put governance in it is the height of arrogance, Chamath. This is not the press's fault.
They're not doing that either.
This is the VC's
fault.
Where's that article? This is the capital allocators' fault. You're blaming the people who are telling the story after the crime is committed.
They're covering the story up.
You can't handle the truth.
Jason, they're covering the story up.
Listen,
they're not telling the
truth.
Can
I get in here? All right, listen, Jason, I will defend you against Chamath saying that somehow you're, that you're letting SBF off the hook. I know you don't want to let SBF off the hook. However, you are letting the press off the hook. And the reason why, hold on a second, the reason why you're using this inaccurate language like rug pulling and run on the bank when there was no run and there was no bank is because you've been infected by this language that the media has inserted into the discourse. The media, and hold on a second. Investors may have got it wrong last year. Investors may have got it wrong when they did that last round. But I think investors now understand what's happening. But the media is still covering for SBF by mis-explaining what happened.
Okay, give me a percentage, Sachs, of who's to blame here. VCs who invested and didn't set up any governance, regulators who did not set rules around crypto, and then the media. What percentage out of 100% is the investors, the regulators, and the press? Go. 3 numbers.
I would say that before the fraud got exposed, one third each before the fraud got exposed, but they were all jointly and severally liable. But after the fraud's been exposed, no investor is still defending SBF. But I think that the investors who were swindled by him, they feel bad about it.
So 30-30-30 is absurd. The press had no way to know the fraud was going on, just like the VCs who put the money in didn't.
What are you talking about?
Jason, are you stupid? Like, wasn't the journalist that exposed the fraud at Theranos? He's the guy that went and did all the work. John Carreyrou should be celebrated. Hold on a second. John Carreyrou went and found this thing when everybody else was like, this is perfect. It meets all of our priors. Let me finish, please. It meets all of our priors. This is great. And John Carreyrou, hold on. And so John Carreyrou was like, this doesn't pass the smell test to me. Let me go do some work. And he pulled one little string, and over the course of 18 months, he exposed the whole bloody thing. So hold on a second. So what is incredible to me is that it was possible to expose this thing before. Nobody did. I agree with David. It's about equal responsibility before, but afterwards, the bulk of the responsibilities now sits with regulators to clean it up and journalists to tell the truth.
Okay. And now may I respond to that since you call me stupid? You are delusional. Number one, every one of those investors in Theranos could have taken a fucking blood test at 2 different places, like Jean-Louis Gassier did, and write a blog post and prove that Theranos didn't work. And they withheld disbelief. Investors putting in $100 million, including Rupert Murdoch, didn't even take a fucking blood test or tell one of their diligence teams to do it. The same thing happened here with the investors in FTX. They did zero diligence. They set up zero governance. This was a failure of the investors and the governance for 99% of the problem. And then regulators should have caught it. And the regulators, in fact, did catch Theranos. So you're completely wrong, Chamath. Again, the journalists come in after the fraud is happening. The investors and governance is responsible for stopping these things. FTX was a failure of governance and investors, and so was Theranos. The end. You're completely wrong.
The question is post exposure.
Why are you guys obsessed with post? How about avoiding these things? You guys are blaming
because the story
journalists.
Is ongoing. Because the
you
story is ongoing.
You are blaming journalists for something that is capital allocators' responsibility. It is our responsibility to do diligence. It is our responsibility to create a board of directors that checks on Elizabeth Holmes and Sam Bankman-Fried.
I didn't disagree.
Nobody's disagreeing with that.
You just call me stupid. You just call me stupid for pointing out something that you refuse to accept.
What are you talking about?
I'm the fact that capital allocators created
I'm
this.
the older brother.
No, you can make whatever joke you want. You guys are giving a pass to the investors.
You're doing your Fredo impression again.
I'm not doing Fredo. You guys are being absurd. This is why people say that we're delusional on this podcast.
Don't call him dumb.
The reason people say we're delusional is that we won't take acceptance of this issue.
Fish called Wanda, like the guy you can't call dumb.
Totally, he loses it.
He goes berserk.
Yeah,
no, I'm not going berserk. You guys have a blind spot. Capital allocators are responsible.
He's like, don't call me dumb.
I'm not going to defend. I'm not going to defend any single one of those investors.
Right,
I think that they did a horrible job too.
It's a great episode.
But the reality is,
just went up.
But the reality is, I think that if you think that you can, it's your decision to defend the mainstream media. I think that that's fine.
I'm not defending them.
No, you are. You said they have no responsibility.
No, I'm blaming the VCs. It's different. The culpability is with the investor class that has not had proper governance and
you
diligence.
Know what, Jason? How many articles have been written excoriating them?
Yeah, some.
Where? A lot. They look like fools.
Yeah, I mean,
show me the Washington Post.
Capital.
No, show me the Washington Post, New York Times that's like digging in to that malfeasance or that lack of oversight and holding them accountable in a way that you feel exposes this problem to create change.
Well, if we look at Theranos, those people who invested, including Draper and
just show me the examples.
Rupert Murdoch, they really went after them for sure. Yeah.
What about here?
Wall Street Journal, 1 day ago, Sequoia Capital apologizes to its fund investors for FTX loss. Venture capital firm tells fund investors that it will improve due diligence on future investments after $100 million loss.
They really got him.
Let me read you.
That's a cover story in the Wall Street Journal.
I'm gonna read you a sentence from the New York Times coverage of SBF. And Sam Bankman-Fried. Hold on a second. Sam Bankman-Fried is neither a visionary nor a criminal mastermind. He is a human who made the same poor choice that generations of money managers have made before him. Are you effing kidding me?
That
was the New York Times coverage.
Yes, you are.
They also said
I am not defending them.
Yes, you are.
I just called Andrew Sorkin a suit.
And then Semaphore, who was on the take, who received millions of dollars of his money, said it was a run on the bank. Okay.
How much did they get?
Now, where is their apology? Hold on a second. Where is their apology? Sequoia has apologized. Where is their apology?
Oh, it has to come. I'm not defending the press.
Yes, you are.
I'm just saying.
Yes, you are.
You are.
No, I am not. I am literally telling you that the New York Times has been asleep at the wheel.
Where's the New York Times apology? The press is always demanding an apology from everybody else.
The press has done a shit
Hold on a second.
The press is so incompetent on this. The Twitter Spaces yesterday did a better job of trying to ask questions and getting to the truth than a single journalist has done, or the collective body of all of journalists.
Absolutely. Literally, randos on Twitter Spaces did a better job than Sorkin.
Let me tell you why no one trusts the press, Jason. First of all, they have an agenda. But second of all, when they make a mistake, they never admit it. When's the last time they did an apology or retraction? When's the last time they did what Sequoia did?
I don't know. And they need to apologize about New York Times. I am in agreement with you on that. But I think we have to first say, and this is where you guys have a blind spot, is what is the responsibility of capital allocators and governance and regulators? I think it's 1, 2, 3. Our industry is responsible for setting up proper governance. The regulators are responsible for making sure that
You're right.
scientific
You know who
claims
I
are
think's
backed up,
responsible?
and then press is a distant third.
You know who I think is responsible? SBF.
Go.
1,
Yes.
2, and 3. And then we can talk about 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, 4, 5, and 6. Capital allocators, regulators, the press, a distant sixth. I agree. Let's go on to China. God, it's so spicy today in here. God, it's so hot.
I mean, I do think when we attack the mainstream media, Jason feels a little tinge of like insecurity and illegitimacy because you were a journalist. My personal perception is I think
that's bullshit. No,
I think that you have an incredibly romantic view of the craft as you practiced it back then, which I think was full of integrity.
Yes, I do.
I think
that's true.
I think that you don't adequately realize how massively the industry has changed in the last 20 years since you've become an investor.
I realize it more than you do. I fully realize that the media has absolutely become biased.
Are they corrupt?
And they have lost, in some cases, yes. I mean, if you're taking money from SBF and then giving him, they are corrupt if they're taking money from SBF and then giving him kid glove coverage. Absolutely. That is the definition of corruption in my mind.
What is it called when you don't take money necessarily like the New York Times and still treat them with kid gloves? What is that?
It is extreme bias. And the New York Times became extremely biased.
Why do you think that bias exists?
They were always left-leaning, but I can tell you why. When Trump came in, a generation of new journalists became activist journalists. They didn't want to tell stories and take it straight down the middle and let the facts tell the story and let the audience make their own decision. They felt an existential risk when Trump came into office. They got Trump derangement syndrome. They picked a side like MSNBC and Fox did, and the business model became, for the New York Times, pick a side and get the subscribers. It was a deliberate, cynical choice on the New York Times part to go full MSNBC or full Fox, the two extremes in mainstream media, in order to get the subs. And they literally rallied the troops there to do anti-tech, anti-Trump coverage, and they became activists. And when journalists become activists, they are no longer journalists, they're activists or commentators. And that's the problem. It's being presented as journalism when in fact it's activism.
So you're
right.
Problem. So just shout out to Matt Taibbi, who just did a Monk debate.
That's well said, by the way.
On this very topic. And he has a great Substack basically saying what you're saying, Jason. And the best quote is, "The story is no longer the boss. Instead, we sell narrative." He's a lifelong journalist whose father was a lifelong journalist, and he understands the way the business has changed. And it's like what you're saying.
And this is why independent media, whether it's Substacks, whether it's call-in shows, whether it's all-in podcasts or other podcasts, Joe Rogan, Sam Harris, whoever it is, independent voices are now what consumers are seeking out because they can sense the bias. They know Rachel Maddow and Tucker have an axe to grind and they're left and right. They didn't expect the New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal to, they knew they were leaning. They didn't expect them to pick a side.
Do you think we should cancel? Do you think folks are better off keeping their New York Times subscription or replacing that New York Times subscription with a basket of Substacks?
Yeah, you answered your own question. It's the latter. I think you're on your own as a consumer now. You're going to have to, and I think this podcast and the nuance we have, shout out to Freeberg for nuance. What we've done on this podcast is
what's that funny, Sachs?
To explain to people.
Freeberg's not the only one with nuance, JK.
Nobody would describe David Sachs with the word nuance.
He's the nuance department on this podcast? What am I?
100% he is. But you wouldn't know that because you leave when Science Corner starts.
I'm the truth department, okay? Sometimes
You're
nuance.
Truth bombs. All right.
I'm the truth department.
The point is,
take the both sides department.
Consumers need to become extremely literate, and they have to do their own search for truth in today's age. They shouldn't trust New York Times. They shouldn't trust us. They should trust themselves. They shouldn't trust necessarily the CDC or, the World Health Organization. They should trust themselves and come up with their own process for figuring out the truth in the middle of this mess.
By the way, this is a good reflection on what's happened with the rest of media with respect to the creator class. Where, it used to be the movie studios and, a handful of kind of aggregated creators that made all of the content, the record labels, and now, independent artists, independent producers, independent creators, and now independent journalists are going to become the bulk of volume that's going to be consumed. It's just a different consumption model. But we've already seen it happen with music. We saw it happen with movies, and we've seen this disruption happen across all of these other media classes. Journalism and what we call the press is very likely going to be kind of that next layer of disruption.
I would trust having a conversation with you about science topics over reading a science article.
100%.
In the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, if I'm being
100%.
honest. I would much
100%.
prefer to talk to you about it. And if it was markets, I'd rather talk to Chamath. And if it was SaaS, I would talk to Sachs or operating a company. Speaking of operating a company.
Or politics.
We'll see. We'll see.
But I think it's about having unique inside insight, right? Like, that wasn't the case. And what's interesting is that the people who are the professionals that have the knowledge and the touch points are also becoming journalists, in the sense that they're also becoming speakers of their truth, right? And I think Twitter is a good enabling platform for this. We see it on YouTube where like scientists are putting out their own videos, or market actors, like people that are traders in the market, go out and they put out their own videos and they put out their own podcast. And I think we're probably a good reflection of that.
Yeah.
In the sense that like we are the actors in the market, and we're not just the independent observer that has kind of a surface level view. We have the depth to be able to talk about the things that we choose to talk about. And I think that's where consumers find value, and will continue to find value in terms of who the journalist or speaker is that they're going to start to trust for their information.